Hello, my name is Brent, and today is the 7th day of June 2020. And I wanted to talk to you about Woodrow Wilson. In my estimation of him, he is one of the worst presidents we've ever had here in the United States. And so I wanted to uh, talk about it, share with you what he was known for, how he got involved in World War One, and how he uh, won a victory at first in the first election for his administration. When he ran for office, he had a three-man race, him being a Democrat and the Republicans, and then they had the Bull Moose Party, which was uh, Theodore Roosevelt running in the third party, the Bull Moose Party. Which, if we understand anything about history, this was a way of basically dividing the vote to eliminate the competitor. So this has been done before. For example, the 68 election, I think it is, or if I can recall correctly, uh, George Wallace ran for president uh, from Alabama, the former governor there, and he was able to take a piece of the vote away uh, from Herbert Hoover. At that point, the South was Democratic and the North was Republican. That's quite the opposite now. Completely changed in the last 40 years, 35, 40 years. And then what's translated then later on is that you had the race between Ross Perot and I can't think of the other two men, but Ross Perot gained quite a bit of the votes, and he was a third party candidate again to allow another candidate to win the office. And I'm thinking that's probably that was when George Bush and Bill Clinton were running in '92. I think that's correct. But anyway, I'm kind of want to get back with this. Some of the things that Wilson introduced, and he is considered a progressive, and his father was a minister here in South Carolina as a pastor at First Presbyterian in Columbia. He was also a pastor at First Presbyterian Church in Augusta, Georgia. Um, when the Civil War came about, the Presbyterian Church divided based upon the slavery issue and some other issues, but that's when they divided. And so basically the South became another denomination per se based upon that issue. But Woodrow Wilson is the son of the former pastor, and I have his name here, but I failed to write it down correctly, so I'll have to look at that later. I'll put it out. But Wilson was promoting what he called the New Liberty. This is one of the first things he got passed in his administration, and that was the expansion of the government to protect other people's liberty. Kind of a crazy way of dealing with something. In other words, he expanded the government, the bureaucrats, in order to supposedly provide liberty for all Americans, which in reality is quite the opposite usually. In fact, most times is. So what I always thought about these guys is, and this is where we used to think of liberal arts education was to be get a well-rounded education in college. That meaning being open-minded to other ideas, not forcing ideas, being open-minded. And so we're seeing the downfall of that over 100 years ago, roughly, with this taking place. Under his administration, the Aldrich Plan, which was the plan to, quote unquote, give private bankers a hold, that is, to begin to print money in the United States when the Constitution forbids that. And he was involved in that, pushing that idea. At first, it was unsuccessful, and then some mischief took place late in the month of December, I think the 24th or 23rd, everyone went home and they got a quorum up and they voted for it, and it was probably less than 10 people even being there, and passed it. That is the Federal Reserve Act. Federal Reserve Act simply is one of the worst things that ever happened to America. It gave a group of private bankers the power to print money and to charge government interest, and charge the printing charge too. So this is how corrupt our government was over 100 years ago. And Woodrow Wilson was involved with this immensely, very much so. And so with this taking place simply was that you don't have to have a Treasury Department, because the Treasury Department is supposed to be doing that. Although we have a figurehead of a Treasury Department now, but basically it's private bankers. And they created these this whole thing. And this is really the beginning of the downfall of the country economically. This is a gradual deal with what we call boom and bust, how bankers and those who invest make money off of booms and also on busts. When countries goes bad, they have the know, and they're able to take and sell something at a greater value. Within a few days, it won't be of any value or less value. And the other way, when it's going up, they get to the top and they know it's going to bust, and so they make money that way also. It's called greed, big time greed. So this is what happened. It's downright wrong. It's just wrong. So with that, also he created the Federal Trade Commission, so another bureaucratic office here with the President Wilson, and that was basically claiming he was stopping trust, stop what we call dealing with trust situations. In other words, breaking up monopolies. He was also involved in what I call something ridiculous, but it took place at the White House. No one ever even thought about this, but they had black people working there and white people working there. And he decided to separate both groups. That is, what we would call Jim Crow laws. And so there would be a water fountain for color people, black people, and there would be a water fountain for white people only. And so he started this, and him being from the South, apparently he thought this was important to instrument into the White House. As soon as he leaves, he's out of the office, that's done away with. So just kind of ridiculous what took place there. With what's taking place also, the Ku Klux Klan begins to have power again, mainly because some of the things that Wilson's doing is the exacerbation of the problem. He's creating a problem when there wasn't really a problem. So he's making it worse, or going against what had been said for a while, and he decided to do these things. And that's not very progressive in a lot of ways. And this is a Democratic president now. This is, and you can see how, this takes place. I failed to mention here that in the second election in 1920, I think it is, Wilson, I'll take that back, 1918, is that he barely wins the election. He wins it by approximately, the popular vote was approximately 500,000 people voted more for him. But the state of Ohio is critical. They had 24 electoral votes. Had he lost that state, he would have lost the nomination. He would not have gotten electoral votes enough. He would have went to another gentleman, which was a token candidate that the Republicans put out. And you'll see this now. Definitely see it right now taking place. Clearly that the Democrats are running a token candidate. Vice President, former Vice President Biden, just a total idiot. I mean, just has no idea what's going on. Seems to be having issues with relapses with his mind, or whatever. I don't know. He's a I wouldn't vote for him anyway, but I don't vote period anyway. But he's a token candidate in order to get Trump back in office if those elections take place in the next 6 months. Actually, the next 4 months. So, the other thing that really took place is the gradual income tax is pushed by him. So you can see all this thing here. This is really critical for you to see. Wilson is not for the common man here. Not one iota. Nowhere near that. He is helping the industries, industrialists, the monopolies all the way here. It's clear as can be here. And everything is being pushed against the common person, a common man. You know, just very clear. So with this itemized deal, there is an income tax already, but it's nowhere. It's not even anything hardly whatsoever. So many people are not even involved in it. That is a gradual income. But in reaction to this, they write a paper, write the bill, and it becomes law. And it's 90 pages long, dealing with gradual income tax. And so, with that taking place, now this takes place after he eliminates import tariffs greatly. So, in order of way the United States gets money at this point is from their sources. One is from import tax. That is items coming in from foreign countries, and we charge a tax on it to protect our own companies. So, which is advantageous in two ways. It gives money to the federal government, and it protects our businesses here so that they don't go out of business and jobs are still provided. Instead, he does the opposite and drops tariffs significantly. And those tariffs have never gone back up, except the administration after him goes back up with a Republican for 4 to 8 years, and then it drops back down, and the import tariffs are tremendously dropped. Now, let's understand this very clearly. When you drop the import tariffs, where is the money going to come from? It's going to come from the people. So this is where the gradual income tax is pushed more. And when I mean pushed, it was there, but now it includes more people than it did before. And in fact, what I understand, what I read, heard here, is that once they started this, they got more money than they did from the tariffs before. So people are already now becoming more in bondage. They are. They're becoming more and more slaves here. You see, they are not only that with the issue of what I call simply import taxes. So now the American businesses, the smaller companies, are now confronting competition from foreigners. So this is harder now there's great opportunity basically for companies to go out of business because they're no longer being protected by import taxes. I mean, what kind of stupid idiot would do this? But this is not a stupid idiot doing this. He's being directed by a gentleman named Edward Mandrell House, who is basically his right-hand man. And even though Woodrow Wilson is an educated man, supposedly, has tremendously poor decisions in his office. And they'll continue on here. So, that was part of the 16th Amendment also being that income tax would be forced on people. Federal income tax. So the money was coming from the individuals and also corporate tax. Before then, it was coming from corporate deal income tax, not from the private people, and then it was also coming from tariffs. The other thing that Wilson pushed in his administration, that is his second one, was not to get involved in the foreign war. Well, if anybody had been paying attention and understanding what was going on, his administration was involved in all kinds of actions in what we would call Central America. And he was involved in these countries. He was involved in Mexico. Yeah, that's right. He attacked Mexico. They supported once were protecting Pancho Villa, and then he decided one day to cross the border and attack U.S. households, and so that caused that problem. Um, Wilson also gets involved in Haiti for many years. In fact, he sends troops in 1915, and basically they do not leave until 1934. Now, in foreign affairs, Wilson is the second guy that does this, but Theodore Roosevelt is the first that actually does this. He says, walk softly but carry a big stick. But he actually built up the U.S. Navy, in other words, to be able to, quote unquote, to invade other countries, if that possibility is. And it does go on with Theodore Roosevelt. Remember that part simply is the issue of that going on with him. But under Wilson, it's dramatically increased. How many countries was the United States involved in? Well, they were still cleaning up the issue with the Philippines when he comes to office, which they eventually leave. He invades Mexico twice. He invades Haiti. He invades also what we call Dominican Republic, and is there for many years too, to 1924. Once they were in Haiti, he decides to go into the next country over, next door. If you understand, the island split in half, and Dominican Republic is to the west, and Haiti is to the east. Yes, to the east. So he attacks basically Haiti first, so then he simply uses the Marines to go in and attack Dominican Republic. So there is almost there from 15 to 34 in Haiti, so it's almost 20 years. And then also 15, the same year, he also invades and goes to their Dominican Republic for 24, so it's 9 years, so approximately 10 years. So the Wilson is now known, and there is actually a think tank, and it's the Wilsonian Institute, I think, for foreign relations or foreign policy or whatever, is to give everybody else to make the world safe with democracy by going in and invading their country and throwing out others. And we still do that. And it's all wrong. It's plain wrong. It's none of our business what they have. They don't. Most of these countries don't even ask for us. We just intervene. But it's wrong. And guess who always pays the piper? Who loses the most? It's always the poor people. It's always those who have hardly anything or hurt far worse than anybody else. I do know simply is he was involved. He got involved also in Guatemala and Honduras. And I know why he went to Guatemala. Went there because of the United Fruit Company, Chiquita bananas. Now, what is the United States supposed to be involved in a domestic, not in a foreign dispute with those who went on strike with United Fruit Company, and they're not going to work, and so our government goes in with the military and forces these people to go back to work, and these people are getting paid poor wages in the first place. So you got to understand something here. This whole foreign affairs issue is about us trying to make the world safe when it's none of our business. Never has been our business. But this is what we call interventions. You don't see other countries do this, do you? I don't see Russia doing this. Do you see Russia doing this? Do you see Japan doing this? Do you even see China doing this until recently? Do you see Brazil doing this? Canada doing this? No, you don't. We've been sold a pack of lies, and people rather believe in the pack of lies instead of ask questions. So what happened was the United States, this is something critical, what I learned many years ago was that George Washington said, his farewell speech said basically stay out of foreign entanglements. It's none of our business. So he was an isolationist. And the United States was pretty much an isolation country for a long time until what we call the late 1800s, 1898 with the battleship Maine. We intervened into Cuba, and we also intervened in Philippines. Which what has Philippines got to do with the battleship Maine? Battleship Maine's right here below Florida, if that even is taking place. It's a false flag mainly. So we decided to declare war on Spain. That's what we do. We just take all their stuff. We take Cuba, and we take Philippines. So what we have eventually, again, later on, is that we enter the First World War. We eventually get into the war. So one of the things he fought and claimed that he was not going to get involved in, we was involved in World War I. Another thing that took place under him, when the War I was very much hated by the American people, there were two bills that were passed. One was called the Espionage Act, meaning simply is you could no longer speak out about the war being wrong here in America. That was over 100 years ago. And people were arrested, speaking out against it. And then you had the Sedition Act, which was another similar to that, except closely, much more tighter. And those who simply said something derogatory about the government, what they're doing, whatever you want to call it, against the flag, anything of that nature, they were arrested. And there were over 1,000 people that were convicted. He also, with this deal, this is also in 1915 and 1916, he also had a spying agency, that is the American Protective League, to work with the FBI. This is before the FBI, so it's a Bureau of Investigation. Eventually, this is Herbert Hoover's job, as he later on. So there are people that now are spying on the American people and what they're saying and doing over 100 years ago. And lastly, the United States and Britain get involved into Russia. They send troops into Russia, and part of this is the way I was taught in school when I took Russian history, was that the United States was supposedly helping out what we call the whites, the reds and the whites. So there's the reds were what we call the communists, and the whites were those who were the former leaders of the past, who were trying to go back to what it was when the Tsar was in power. And the whites lost. And the United States did send troops there, and they sent armaments and weapons for the white side. The problem was that the whites were what I call basically fighting a defensive war instead of an offensive war against the Reds. The interesting thing simply is that he claims they're fighting against communism, but in reality, his own government, same time period, that Trotsky, who was involved in the communist overthrow of the Tsar in Russia, was that he was caught in Canada on a ship, and the Canadian officials said, because they felt that he was he was known as a communist. And what transpired was simply the government said, it's okay, let him go. So Trotsky was allowed to go on and eventually be involved in the communist takeover of the Tsar, the Russia itself. So I don't know how in the world anybody could get any worse than this, but there are some other ones we'll talk about later on. Theodore Roosevelt wasn't that great of a president either, but his Franklin was far worse, and there are others besides him also. Just wanting to explain to you, this didn't just happen. This has happened over 100 years ago, and we continue to do it. and it's not to our best interest to do these things. But it is for business, though. That's who it's about. Okay, have a good night. Take care.